Hello everyone. Okay, sorry my mic was not working. Hopefully y'all can hear me. This is Keller. We're talking bugs again. And I'm continuing to work on my katydid. One second, let's make sure everything's working. Alright, and tonight I think I'm going to start working on the wings here, and then we'll do a little bit of detailing and get into poly painting, because it looks like we're getting pretty close here. Oh, I got to work on the end here a little bit. So I'm going to, let's take a look at the wings here. So these got little baby wings. They're kind of cute. This is what they look like. I guess this is a younger katydid. Kind of strange as far as wings go. You can see it really depends on the katydid, but this is kind of my model for this one. let's take a look here at some of the other ones. This one's not really visible. It's the same kind of thing. There's just a couple little flippity flaps with some cool detailing on here. Okay. Turn off perspective here, and let's see. Do a quick check here on all right. Okay, so I'm going to subdivide this, Control D, and let's see. Take a look here. So they kind of have an interesting overlap here. So what I think I might do is kind of model these symmetrically with a little bit of separation in between them, and then deal with the overlap later. That just helps me cut down on a little bit of sculpting time, because they are kind of, for the most part, mostly symmetrical. They just have a weird little overlap to them. So that'll save a little bit of time. So I'm going to bring up my move tool here real quick, and just kind of shape these a little bit based on what I see here. Actually, what we can do right here is let's rotate this. That's better. And then use my TWS cloth brush here, and I'm going to kind of draw in, whoops, this kind of thing right here. Let's turn on solo mode. And I usually, like with these kinds of thin objects, maybe draw just a little bit of an edge here, just around the border, just to make it look a little bit more organic. You know, probably as I detail it, it'll probably become less apparent, but just to start off with, I like to give it just a little bit of a border. It helps make it look natural. And it's 83,000 points, so I'm going to subdivide it again up to about 330,000 points. And just kind of, I like to sculpt in these larger details and then just do a little bit of smoothing here. And we have this kind of interesting fold in here. And I will admit that I'm not really an expert on katydid wings. I've modeled them a couple times before. They're kind of strange because they're so small. There's some katydids that have really large wings and they fly around and stuff, but I think this particular species, either it's just because it's a very young katydid, or it's just doesn't have flight capabilities, this particular species. Or sometimes it might be sexual dimorphism. Sometimes in some species of insects, like the male will be able to fly and the female won't, or vice versa, the other way around. There are actually, believe it or not, wingless flies, which means they're flies that can't fly, which kind of defeats the purpose of them being named flies, doesn't it? I really should. I haven't done a fly for the live stream before. I really should, because they're interesting. Then they're my least favorite species of insect, or sorry, that's a whole order of insects, not species. I'm gonna move down here, subdivision levels, round that out a little bit. But they are incredibly diverse, and there's some really interesting ones out there that are worth taking a look at. Of course, I still have some unfinished bugs that I gotta do, like my longhorn beetle. So I might try and finish that up after I finish this one for the next project that I do. Hello, thanks for joining me. Get this up again. I'll do a little bit of a clay polish here, just to kind of tighten up the details a little bit. I think that this needs a little bit of go to the clay tubes and kind of fill this out a little bit. And again, for this particular model, I'm not really going for realism because he's kind of a stylized, cartoony version of a katydid, so I can have a little bit of artistic license with this. The fun part, of course, is all these little details. It makes it look like, I don't know, hard to describe. This is one of my favorite things to figure out, is how to kind of recreate this kind of detail, because a lot of that is what gives the insect its personality after you've defined all the major forms. So I'll just get this going here a little bit. And I apologize for the sniffling. It's allergy season, so if I sniff a lot, that's why. Okay, let's play with this a little bit. One way to start off getting this kind of detail in there is with some surface noise. Let's see if I've got decent topology here. I was just done with ZBrush, so it's quick and dirty topology. But what I might do is create some UVs real quick for this, just so I can experiment with using surface noise and UVs. So I'm going to quickly just use UV Master to create UVs. So what I'll do is I'm going to hold Control and Shift and switch to the Select Lasso brush. And the reason I do this is because there's a special property that the Select Lasso brush has, where if I Control Shift click on an edge, it will hide an edge loop. So you can see a lot of it is disappearing here, and that's because I have spirals. So it's not the best topology in the world, but it's usable. Let's do something like, what I might do is, another way to go about doing this is I'm going to go here like this and just do, I'm going to set up some polygroups here. Polygroups, and I'll do front. And so now I have polygroups for the front, polygroups for the back. And I'm going to go into Z plugin and choose UV Master, Symmetry, turn on polygroups, and I'll do unwrap. And that will create some UVs based on my polygroups. So I can go down here to UV map, do morph UV, see what they look like. So this is what the UVs look like. The reason they're puffed up there is because of this bump value. If I bring the bump value down to 0 and I do morph UV, you'll see that they're flat UV shells. Okay, so that's fine as far as UVs go. I mean, not perfect, but it'll work. We'll give it a try anyways. So let's turn off polyframe. And I'll go to surface, noise. Yeah, I'm trying to use music for the background of these because I watched one of my own live streams without music, and it was hard to watch. I'm just going to play with this a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to necessarily get something exactly like this, but I can play with it as just as a starting point, you know. And the other thing I could do is, let's see, if I turn on UVs, it's not going to be a whole lot different, but it's kind of cool. Play the noise scale. Another thing that's fun to play with is we go to the noise plugin, and some of these noise options in here. I'll use the max on noise. And let's see. The thing about this is it's hard to get a decent preview. So I'm just going to choose one. Let's see if I bring down the scale. Nope. Let's do this. I'll choose OK. And plug-in scale. This is not the easiest interface to use, I think, because sometimes it's hard to get the scale right. Let's do this again. It's not giving me anything good. So let's get rid of the noise plugin. I'll just use regular noise. Let's try something like this. And then instead of applying it to the mesh, I'll do mask by noise. Maybe invert that noise and hide it. And then just go over with the inflate brush a little bit. This is just going to be like my base coat of noise, which I can sculpt on top of this. Something like that. I don't really care about the underside so much. And maybe I'll clear the mask by control drag and release. And then maybe I'll use something like orbs cracks with a really low Z intensity. Too low. Switch this to Z sub. Kind of do this kind of squiggly, veiny pattern. I'm going to subdivide this another time. So now we're up to about 1.34 million. Do some looping. just going to draw some squigglies. Yeah, something like that. The drawing is kind of nice because I can follow sort of the contour of the design a little bit. I usually experiment with a bunch of different things when I'm creating this kind of detail. I don't always, sometimes I'll just play with surface noise. Maybe it works, maybe it just gives me a little starting place to sculpt with. Usually I like to kind of use it as a sort of inspiration for the other noise that I might draw on top. The other fun ways to create surface details, you can use the extract brushes. The mesh extract brushes are a lot of fun. And sometimes I'll create a brush, and if it works really well, I might save it. For use for other times. There's some bugs, like if you look at like a weevil, they have a very, some beetles have a very distinct sort of dot pattern on them. It's kind of fun to try and imitate. I don't know how I would describe this. This reminds me of some crispy chip or something like that. And this down here definitely looks like surface noise type stuff. I'm kind of alternating holding the Alt brush and releasing it, so I'm sculpting both outwards and inwards. And create some loopies. Of course, in sculpting all this detail, I'll use it in the poly paint later on to really kind of bring out the details and help with the color and stuff. This is going to be a fun one to poly paint. I haven't decided exactly what colors to go with, but maybe I'll do something like this. Because I like this kind of painting right here is a lot of fun. And since it's my own made-up species of katydid, I can choose my own colors and do something different, but that's definitely a cool inspiration. Go back over here, just create some circular spots in here, dig in little ditches. I want to say hi to Valentine real quick. She's got a cold. I hope she feels better soon. She's becoming quite the ZBrush artist herself. You guys gotta look out because she's only 6 years old. And she knows how to poly paint and Dynamesh and ZBrush and Nanomesh and fiber mesh and Frico mesh. There should be a Frico mesh. Okay, I might have overdone it, but that's okay. I'm going to play with this a little bit and do. Let's go down here. Do a clay polish. Invert the clay polish, go over it with Is this really what I want? Interesting. I'm just using the clay polish, and it's a technique that I probably use way too much, where I use the clay polish and then leave the mask on, and then use the inflate brush just to kind of pull out some interesting details with that residual mask. It's great for creating Giger-like details, but I probably overuse it. But you get these nice little spotting kind of things. Another cool thing to use, maybe I'll play with a little bit, is the Smooth Peaks brush. I've kind of gotten away from my design here, but now I'm having fun, so that's always a danger in ZBrush. I'm getting kind of more of a... Oh, that's kind of neat right there. Well, you know, I wrote several books on ZBrush, so... but the books that I wrote on ZBrush are a bit out of date. So... I know that Ryan Darling has just created a new ZBrush book. Let me see if it's out here. Okay, so this book just came out from my good friend and also ZBrush artist extraordinaire. ZBrush Projects: Unleash Your Creativity in ZBrush by honing your digital skills and techniques and 3D rendering skills. So you can check this out. So it just came out if you're into books. It's got Jared Krajewski, another good friend of mine, teacher at Noman, and Ian Robinson, of course, another good friend of mine. So this is probably a good one to check out. Like I said, the books that I wrote are a bit old because they're like ZBrush 4. I do tend to do more video training these days than books, because books are hard to write and they're very time consuming. I have a few courses on Udemy as well. This is ZBrush for jewelry designers. This is a beginner's course. I wrote it for ZBrush design. For jewelry designers, but it really applies to everyone. It just kind of has a bias towards 3D printing, but it goes through the entire interface. This one I think is a good one also because it goes through every different type of geometry in ZBrush, and I also have little chapters on pro tips here. So this is available on Udemy, and then the other one I have is Demystifying ZBrush Materials. So this is all about ZBrush materials, standard materials, matcap materials, layered materials, and redshift materials. So that's also available on Udemy, so you can check those out. And then I have a bunch of videos on the Noman workshop. They tend to be a bit more on the advanced side, but hopefully that gives you some ideas. I don't know if you can post links into the chat here, but if you look on Amazon for the name Darling and ZBrush, you can find his book. So I think I overdid this here, but that's okay. You know why? So I'm going to clear the mask, and I'm going to go down a few subdivision levels. Maybe subdivision level 4, and just smooth this out a little bit. I'm kind of really just experimenting and fooling around here, so I find if you do this enough, eventually you kind of get what you're looking for if you're just playing around. I made these too squiggly. Of course, there's also the undo history, that helps too. I don't know if I'm crazy with this look. It kind of ended up looking a bit too spaghetti. So let's go back in time with the undo history. Maybe something more like right around here is better. And now what I'm going to do is I'll go down a few subdivision levels and smooth it out. I always tell people to just spend some time just goofing around in ZBrush without the intention of making something specific. It's one of the best ways to learn the tools. Just make a mess and then delete it. Zoom in here again. I think I got just a little too squiggly. Do like a cavity mask. Let's see. That's my cavity. Let's try mask by smoothness. That's interesting. Mask by curvature. Mask by peaks and valleys. That's a little too spotty. That's not bad though. We can go in here and then just do a overall inflate. Kind of goopy. Oh, but it's not too bad. We'll clear that. There we go. I think that looks a little bit closer to what I want. Sorry, my brain stopped for a second here. Masking, mask by cavity. Notice these wings don't have a whole lot of veining like you see on like a bee or wasp wings or dragonfly wings. They're kind of just like little flaps, almost like a lytra in a way. And I don't think they're super functional. But they do look cool. Hey, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. I missed last week because I was in Paris for a really cool conference, the IMAG Conference 25. So I got to see lectures by really amazing artists, Yama, Sparth, Dylan Cole, among others, Amy Ash. That was a really great one. And of course our friend Damien of the Damien Standard Brush gave a really cool demo. It was a really awesome weekend, really awesome conference. Made me feel a little bit more hopeful about the industry because everybody's feeling the slump right now. So it's a little bit discouraging sometimes. Lower the lazy mouse radius on here is too much. There we go. But you know, it was kind of hopeful and inspiring, and it's great to see artists. I love the artists that get up there and actually ZBrush in front of an audience. That's always incredible to see. Who else did see? Ash Thorpe gave a demonstration. So many people that it was like hard to remember them all. And then next year they've announced they're going to do it in Montreal, which I hope I get a chance to go to because I actually lived in Montreal when I was a little kid. I'm going to pull up the website because it's a very cool one. This was the conference, the website, if you guys want to check it out. iMag Masterclasses. That's me. And then they have online, if you missed it and you want to see the lectures, you can subscribe online and watch some of the lectures. But these are the speakers that they had. Damien was really great. I didn't get to see all of them because they're like overlapping and stuff. Alan McKay was really great. Raphael Lacoste, one of my favorites. Absolutely fantastic. Christian Alsman, if you're a Star Wars buff, he was all Star Wars the whole time. Dylan Cole, of course, always amazing. Just some really, Christopher Lautrep was really great. Just really cool artists. So, you know, it's kind of nice because it's kind of cool to see what's going on in Europe with the European visual effects community. Sparth, of course, was awesome. So I highly recommend that. Alright, it's taken me a little bit of a journey to get here, but now this is kind of like more what I was hoping to achieve. But you know, sometimes you just gotta play with stuff and just see what works. That's the fun of ZBrush. So I'm just going in and doing it manually now. Just a little bit, not quite as ridiculous as I was doing before. Just a little kind of digging in here and pulling out sort of this almost like veining like quality here. I think I did too many loops and too many squigglies that last version. Whenever you're doing detailing or anything like this, you got to remember the sunk cost fallacy. It's something that artists and gamblers both suffer from. And that is the idea that if you work really hard on something, you're reluctant to scrap it and start over because of the time you spent on it. You kind of convince yourself, it's like, well, I spent a lot of time on this, so it's good, and you're going to keep it, even though the deep down inside, you know it's not right, and it's not what you want. And sometimes you got to learn. It's a very hard lesson to learn, to just ditch something that's not working or didn't work and try and make it better, closer to what you want. So this is the kind of detail that I like right here. It usually takes me a little while to find out exactly the best technique to get something going. So I usually try, you know, whatever tricks I have in my trick bag at first, and if that's not working, try something else, or just layer it on top of like what you've done before, like I'm doing here. And then of course, smooth brush is your friend. Look at that. That's a little bit better. Then, you know, something that's fun to experiment with. You hold the shift key. Move this out of the side. I'm going to hold the shift key and go into the brush palette and choose the Smooth Peaks brush. Once I can find it. Where's the Smooth Peaks brush? Smooth Peaks. This one right here. I'm going to hold the shift key and bring up my draw size And this is just going to smooth the tops of the peaks. And so leave little craters in there, and it can create some nice effects sometimes. Yeah, like this kind of thing. That looks nice. I like that. That's working much better. Okay. Let's save this guy. And then what I'm going to do is go down to a lower subdivision level and see if I can create this kind of overlap. Let's turn off solo. Take a look at our reference here. So they're both kind of tucked under this part right here. They're kind of tucked under there, and then they have a bit of overlap. So let's start by tucked under there already a little bit. Let's do that. And then I'm going to turn off symmetry. Alright. And bring up my move brush. Let's go to a lower subdivision level. And I'm going to lower my Z intensity on the smooth brush so I don't overdo it. I'm going to draw size, and we can also use the move topological. This guy right here. The reference over here. Let's see what I'm trying to do. Oops. Let's do it auto groups. Got one mast here, so I can move it under here. It's easier. Yeah, I do use Substance Painter for a lot of my. What I usually do is I'll poly paint the, and you'll see I'll do it in this demo. I'll poly paint the color to get the diffuse, just because I like working with poly paint in ZBrush, to get my diffuse or my albedo or whatever you want to call it, color pass, and then I'll bring high poly and low poly versions with UVs into Substance and do the baking, and then do all my other maps there, normal maps. I usually use ZBrush for creating color maps with poly paint and also displacement maps, but things like normal maps and curvature and translucency and all the other stuff I'll do in Substance. Although my partner and wife Irene is becoming a much better Substance Painter artist than I am, which is nice because now we have a little pipeline going. So, and she loves bugs too. So a lot of times I will hand the bugs off to her or whatever we're working on, and she can do the texturing in Substance Painter, which is kind of fun. It's very nice to be to be with somebody who's also an artist that you can work with and split the labor with. It means you can do a lot more, and it's also fun to talk about this stuff. Okay, did I bring it over too far? No, I don't think so. It's weird. I mean, it's just a weird placement in general for how these wings work. I think I need to do some research in katydid wings because they're a bit baffling to me. All insect wings are kind of weird, but these are particularly strange because they I mean, obviously it's not going to fly with these things, right? And it doesn't look like there are any larger wings being hidden because this is the top of the abdomen or the mesothorax. So, and this is it. So let's do a little research here. As you can see with some katydids, they got big wings, and some of them are really, really teeny. It might just be that these are just really immature. I mean, they're brightly colored, so that's also a possibility. But I mean, it's a very diverse order of insects. They're closely related to grasshoppers, so sometimes they're referred to as grasshoppers, but not exactly the same. See that these guys look like they're folded out, so I could be wrong. They might have a larger wings folded underneath these parts right here. I do know a katydid expert, so I can ask him for more information on how they work. For this little guy, I'm going for the teeny weeny wings. Oh, here's a good immature. Okay, so you can see this one is a very young katydid, and the wings are very small. Short wing katydid. That's what we have right here. We can go to bug guide now. So there's a whole class called short-winged katydids. Obolopteryx. Let's take a look at these. Bush crickets. Okay. We have a bit more information than that. Thanks, Wikipedia. iNaturalist. Yeah, it's the same. Wikipedia has just copied this. Great. Well, we're just going to call it a short-winged katydid. There you go. Do I use a high-low projection of substance to work directly on high poly decimate, etc.? Okay, sorry, I meant to respond to this. I use the high-low projection and substance. Some of these that, in fact, I have examples here in my reference that are actually pictures of a model that I did. So this is a more realistic katydid that I did a few years ago. Katydid that I did. And this is actually a game-ready model, so this is pretty low polygon, but in terms of the final model. But as you can see, the details came through pretty nicely in the bake. Even though, I mean, you can see this was done for a VR project, so it had to be very low polygon. I forget the exact final poly count on this one, but it came across, pretty nicely with some of the detailing here. So I generally do that. So like I say, when I haven't done much high poly, like what I'll do is for my low poly version. I'll set up the UVs and everything, so I'll do an initial UV pass in ZBrush, clean up the UVs in Maya, bring it back into ZBrush. It's a fun process. And then what I'll do is I'll take my high polygon version and I'll decimate it and export that as my high poly, because a lot of times my insects, the high poly version could be 60, 80 million polygons, depending on what I'm trying to do. So I might, merge all of that, decimate that, export that as my high poly version, and then combine all the subtools for my low poly version, export that with UVs, and do the baking in Substance, and that usually works pretty well. I'm sure there are probably better methods of doing it, but that seems to suit my purposes for the most part. So let's see our little tail end here. There we go. There's some nice reference for the butt. It's the last part of the Katie did that I haven't done yet. Katie did butt. And so the question becomes, am I going to sculpt directly here on the abdomen, or am I going to do this as a separate subtool? Because we have this kind of like interesting fold here. Let's do this. Let's take a look at this. It's like we have an extra set of, these are called like the tergites, so maybe an extra set of tergites coming out of here, and then this wonderful, beautiful anatomy coming out of that. So what I will do is I'm going to, how's this looking? That looks okay. It needs more detailing, but I'll worry about that later. I'm going to go to B2 here. And let's hide the head. And I think what I'll do is to create this geometry right here. There's lots of different ways to do that, but sometimes if I'm in a hurry, a good old-fashioned mesh extract is a nice way to go. So I'll go down to a lower poly version, like right here, and just quickly paint like a mask. Kind of roughly in the shape that I want. Something like that. That's good enough. No need to go crazy with that. And we'll go down to subtool, and down here we'll do extract. And I'm going to set the thickness, 0.05 is probably about right. That looks pretty good. So I'll accept that. Clear the mask. And that back for reference. So here I have my extract here, and now I'm just going to quickly smooth it. Pull it out. Reference here so you guys can see what I'm doing. So I'm doing basically this right here. Quick ZBrush. Again, very low poly here. was easier to work with. That's good. Subdivide it. And twist it here. What happened? It's a bad geo. Let's go back a few stages. Maybe we'll go up to this level. Let's go down here to display properties, double. There we go. We just got some. Oh, I know what's going on. Let's see. I have. Nope. No auto masking turned on. Things are getting all flipped around here. Let's try this. Oh, the other thing is I got smooth peaks on. That's why my smooth brush is working so weird. Forgot to switch back. Okay. The shift key. There we go. It's always something. Trying to get the shape right. Okay, I'm fussed with this enough. Let's get on to the other parts. I can always come back and shape this a bit more. This is hard to let go. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to clear the mask from there. Go down here to my escape cloth and kind of subdivision level. To create that kind of. Okay, I'm fussing a bit too much, and now the question becomes: we've got this, and then we've got these little arm deals. Okay, sorry for the etymological technical terms. The arm deals coming out here and crossing. So let's put that in here, and then we'll put the rest of the details in. Sorry, this is what I'm talking about right here. Gotta see my reference. I'm gonna make these guys, and then I can do the rest of it around that. So let's see. Always a good idea to save. Okay. Hey, have you noticed any LA studios switching Blender over Maya recently for VX? Yeah, well, I'm actually I've relocated to Europe now, but yeah, there's a lot of people are making the switch to Blender. I'm still primarily a Maya guy, primarily a ZBrush guy, but also a Maya guy, but I'm learning Blender as well. Blender is used a lot by concept artists, I think, right now, so it's sort of making that transition. But I mean, the movie Flow was made in Blender, and that won a whole bunch of Oscars, so that is probably a good indicator that Blender is definitely production ready. So I think it's worthwhile to learn Blender. I say that with, I'm working on a Maya series right now, a training series, and I still love Maya. Maya is really awesome for a lot of things, but Blender is definitely, I don't know, I mean, when it comes to sculpting, ZBrush is still much better than Blender because it's just, the brushes are much better, so on and so forth. But Blender has so many good qualities in terms of the animation and the other modeling tools, and the rendering is pretty good, and people love grease pencil. So yeah, I would say that you're going to find it more and more when you're looking at job listings that people are going to want to see Blender. Like, aside from ZBrush, which is the greatest program ever created, the other programs that are worth learning is, Substance, obviously Substance Painter, Blender, and Unreal are big ones, and then also Houdini. If you have multiple lifetimes, you can learn Houdini as well. Houdini is one of those things I learn a little bit, then I forget it, then I have to go back years later and learn it again. But those are the ones that seem to be trending the most right now. But that doesn't mean that like Maya isn't still used a lot in production. Maya is a little bit more, has a more proven track record for in production, but it's also had years and years and years to develop. Does that answer your question, or is that rambling? Short answer is yes. I see more and more Blender being asked for, and something that I'm learning too. Okay, so what I can do is I'm just going to make one of these, and then I'll duplicate it and cross it over. Or actually, I can make two. A couple ways we could do this. I could do Z-spheres, but I feel like doing something a bit different tonight. So what I'll do is just do some sculptures just for fun. So I'm going to take a star here and turn it into just a good old polysphere, a little blob of clay. Over here, scale it down, put it roughly into place. Maybe like right here. And then what I'll do is I'm going to go down here to geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld. So copy, and I'll turn on symmetry and snake hook. Yes, I know, sculptress. And just start to pull out this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to point these down so that I literally cross over each other just yet. We got this. Inflate here. Yeah, I would say for job security, it's not a bad idea to learn Blender. And it's just like, going from Maya to Blender is like going from French to or like Spanish to Italian. It's not that different. just gotta learn where the buttons are. I think I have a harder time learning Cinema 4D because that's just too wacky for me. And I don't know, something about Cinema 4D. It's a fine program. And I'll work with many Cinema 4D artists on a regular basis. But I tend to be more of a Maya guy. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is, even though there's not the right proportions, and also they're not crossing over in quite the right way, because I don't want to merge these guys, I'll turn off Sculptress, and I'll go in here to ZBrush, and let's just do like a quick ZBrush like this. And then what I'll do is it's pretty close. Look at another view, just make sure we're not tripping. It's pretty wild. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask one of these. Whoops, turn off symmetry. Mask one of these. And yeah, it's always tough to like make that switch from one software to another, because if you keep getting work and it has to be done quickly, like for me, I'm going to do it in Maya because I'm faster in Maya, and so I'm trying to look for good opportunities to learn like Blender. You know, that's where personal projects are always helpful, and forcing you to learn new software. But again, it always comes down to how much time do you have to spend on personal projects and things like that. I mean, these days, of course, with the work being slow for a lot of us in the industry, if it's not for you, good for you. But for a lot of us, it's been very slow in the past few years. It's a good opportunity to learn some new skills. So I've been learning some Blender when I can, and some Unreal. So I do think that you know, some of the talks that I attended when I was in Paris last week were talking about the industry and why it's been such a slump. There's a lot of reasons. We know some of the obvious ones like COVID, post-COVID, and post-writer strike, and competition with AI and all that kind of stuff. But what I didn't realize is how much things like, economic stuff I don't pay attention to, like interest rates and things like that, and stuff that investors worry about affects us, because if people aren't investing and there's no money to develop games or movies or whatever, then, well, that also explains why there's not as much work. So it's a lot of things, but here's hoping that it gets better in 2025. Yeah, Blender, yeah, I know. And I'm definitely guilty of being a bit of a snob against Blender, because I've used Maya since 1998. So my career is, Maya is my moneymaker. So, and then a lot of the times the thing that's kind of irritating about Blender, I'm going to go on a Blender rant, which is going to get me in trouble, but whatever. Sometimes the attitude of the Blender users gets a little bit annoying. It's like... there's a saying that says that every generation thinks that it invented sex, right? Which is a joke, because, as you grow older and you hear younger people discover the things that you've known about for a long time, it can be sometimes a little bit grating. You could say the same thing about music or whatever. But it's like to hear a lot of the young Blender artists get really excited about a feature that's in Blender that's, been part of our tool set for years. And be like, all right, guys. And it's like... And then, there's sometimes you get the attitude they're like, Blender users are like, we're Occupy Wall Street or whatever. And I'm like, that's fine. But they can be kind of annoying. So, yeah, I understand that it has been sort of like treated as a joke in the industry for a long time. But there's a lot of artists out there that are starting out and they don't have maybe the funds to learn Maya, and there's so much free stuff on Blender that it's hard to resist. And so some of the concept artists that I saw at the conference last week, they're not really doing big 3D stuff because they're concept artists, right? They might throw together a 3D scene and then do a paint over in Photoshop. It's a pretty common technique. So these days a lot of them are using Blender because it's fast and it's cheap. Well, it's cheap and free. I think the problem that Blender has that Maya used to suffer from, when back in the, well, it's still true in Maya, you can find Mel scripts that do just about anything, right? So back in the days of like high-end 3D and all that kind of stuff, you download all these scripts to add functionality into Maya, but the problem is a lot of times the people who write the scripts kind of just disappeared, so you'd have no support. The script wouldn't work, or it doesn't not updated for this version of Maya, or something goes wrong and you can't contact anyone to get the script to work, and now you've been depending on it and it's no worky. And the Blender uses a lot of extensions to create more functionality, so you can buy these extensions for $15-20 or whatever, and they really can make Blender do a lot of really cool stuff. Problem is that the person who wrote the extension decides that they would do something else with their time, then you might be SOL when it comes to actually getting the thing to work. That can be true for a lot of things. So it's one of the reasons why I don't try not to depend too much on a lot of plugins, because if your entire workflow depends on 50 different plugins, then you show up for a job at a studio and go to the guy who's running the IT and say, I can't work unless I have these 25 plugins installed. A lot of times they're going to look at you and be like, we're not installing that. Figure it out without. And so it's like, so a lot of times I will do my best to learn how to use my software to the best of my abilities, just using as few plugins as possible. I mean, the nice thing about ZBrush is a lot of the plugins are free and they're supported by Maxon Pixelogic, so that they are pretty dependable. I haven't used a whole lot of Z scripts out there. I know there's a lot of Z scripts that can do some cool stuff, but for the same reason, it's like, professionally speaking, I need stuff to work consistently. And so that's just, but that's just the way I am. Yeah, I mean, well, it's like how you set up your portfolio, of course. You could always put the Maya stuff first, and I mean, my portfolio is a horrible mess right now, so this is definitely don't do as I do. But you can set up your portfolio so that you have high-end Maya stuff first, and then Blender, or you could even show sort of a mix of the two in a particular project, or show alternate versions, how you did it in Maya, how you did it in Blender, or whatever, depending on how much time you want to put into it. But you could always put the Maya stuff first and the Blender stuff second, or later in your portfolio. Okay, so now we have. Normally, when I do realistic insects, I do a lot more research than I've done on this one, so I'll find diagrams that show how these various parts work. Right now I'm just kind of winging it, sorry, excuse the pun, for this one, but this is supposed to be a cartoony version anyways. So this is more of just a insect for fun kind of thing. There's some parts of insects. I mean, it's like studying insect anatomy. Don't get offended by it when I say this, but it's every bit as hard as studying human anatomy. Mainly because unlike human anatomy, which you can learn the general forms and then change proportions as needed depending on the type of person you're working with, and based on the same some rules you can follow. With insects, the variety is so wide that there's a lot to learn, and everything you learn on an ant can't necessarily be applied to a beetle. Everything you learn on a beetle can't necessarily be applied to a bee. Excuse me, there are some general rules, but insects bend the rules much more than humans do. So it can take a while to really learn stuff well, and there's some things that I'm still working on, like mouth parts and wing muscles and stuff like that. Yeah, hopefully someday I can become more adept at doing them. So I'm just doing a mesh extract for this geometry right here, just like I did before. By the way, they're doing you guys probably heard, they're doing a reboot of Starship Troopers. I still think the original Verhoeven Starship Troopers is a masterpiece of political satire and just an all-around amazingly goofy-ass movie to watch. They're getting, how can I pronounce his name wrong, but District 9 guy, Neil Blomkamp, you know who I'm talking about. The guy who directed District 9 is the director. So I think from what I read, he's going back to the original Heinlein source material and going to be more true to the books. So probably not as much ridiculous fun as the Verhoeven movies, but hopefully cool bugs. I don't know. Hopefully I'll get a call from somebody. I'd love to work on something like that. You know, when the interesting thing about portfolio review, from my experience in the places that I've worked, is, and I've mentioned this before, so this is based primarily on my experience, but I tend to work for smaller studios, so it may or may not apply. Take it with a grain of salt. But anyways, let's say we're in midway through a project, and the producer or whoever's decided, hey, we don't have enough modelers on this. We don't have enough texture artists. We need texture artists. We need somebody who's good. So they'll go to, and they'll do two routes. The first thing they'll do is put together an ad to advertise for a position, open position. All right, texture artist, modeler, whatever, effects guy. But while they're doing that, The producer is going to go into the studio and walk up to all of the artists who are currently working away, and then they say, hey guys, we need to hire a modeler, texture artist, or whatever. Who do you know that's good and available? And everybody will open up their email and start emailing their friends that they've worked with and say, hey, this job is pretty cool, this project's awesome, they need a texture artist, I'm going to recommend you, are you available, etc. And so, or the other thing they'll do is they'll look for recommendations. Maybe they'll go to a school or something like that, and say we need this kind of stuff, and they'll send in a bunch of portfolios. And the HR people will look at the portfolios and look at the necessary skills. Okay, this guy knows Maya, he knows ZBrush, he knows Blender. HR people, they don't know ZBrush from Blender, from any of this stuff. It's just a bunch of words that they hear, and they're trying to match what they see on the resume with what they need in the job description. The artists, however, who are calling up their friends, they know who's good at ZBrush or Substance or whatever. And so the point is that most likely the job, even though it's listed, is going to go to a friend of somebody who's working in the studio already, because work is stressful, and when you're working in a studio environment, you want to work with people that can hack it, do a good job, work under pressure, and take criticism, etc. So the people who've already done this and worked in the studios with these other guys are going to have the advantage. That's why it's important to build relationships in the industry. And then when you're working on a job, even if it's a stupid job that you hate, you have to do your best to get along with the people you're working with, because those people that you're working with now are going to be your key to getting a job later on in the industry. And it can go years. I can go 5, 6, 7 years without hearing from somebody. Then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'll get an email. Hey, Eric, what's going on? We need a ZBrush artist, and we thought you'd be perfect for this job. So that's a lot of times how you get jobs. So, having Maya, Blender, etc. on your resume and your portfolio is important, but it's not the sole determining factor as to whether or not you're going to get the job. The main determining factor is going to be who you know, who you worked with, and their opinion of you when you worked with them. And that could be hard, because sometimes you end up working in a job that you really can't stand, and it's very tempting to storm off in a huff or just say this job is stupid. I mean, I worked on jobs where I was like, I was at Imaginary Forces, and Imaginary Forces is a great company. I liked working for them. But they do a wide variety of stuff. Title work, they're known for stuff like, the title sequence on Stranger Things and that kind of stuff, which I think they won an Emmy for. But when I worked for them, I worked on all kinds of goofy stuff. And one of the things I worked on was a Canadian commercial for feminine hygiene products. It was a really strange job where I had to literally animate a centaur flying through the sky and shooting an arrow. And the guy was made up, he's a constellation of stars, and he shot an arrow across the sky, and it hit a part of the sky, and that sky turned into, let's just say, a feminine hygiene product. That was the commercial, not my idea, but I worked on it, and I did my best on it, even though I thought it was really silly. And it came out just fine, the client was pleased, everybody got paid, blah, blah, blah. But the important thing about that commercial is that, I didn't go in there with the attitudes like, this is beneath me, I don't need to be doing this stuff, and this is a dumb idea, and I don't want to do it, blah, blah, blah. I went over with the attitudes like, this is a job, and I do my best. And then, of course, years later, people I worked with on that job called me for a much cooler job. Same team, same company, much better job. But, so those kinds of stories are important to keep in mind when you're working in the studio environment, Another funny thing is I was in a very popular here in France to go to like big flea markets, and I've been buying up DVDs and getting the physical media going, and pawing through a box full of DVDs the other day, and I found the movie that I actually worked on in Imaginary Forces, D-War, Dragon Wars. It's pretty funny. Bought it for €1. Never seen it. course, when I do see it, it's going to be in French, which should be pretty funny. Anyways, I'm babbling. Which one is better for my portfolio? Focusing on type of style thing, making different type of thing for hard surface, organic, different styles, realistic styles. Okay, it's a really great question. Let me go back here. If someone doesn't know you and they see blend, okay. It's really hard because start with the question. What would you most like to be doing in a studio? What's the most important thing for you? To be working a lot, or to be doing something that is like super cool? And the reason I ask this question is because you can choose to go to two different routes, at least when you're starting out. You can go to the route of a generalist, which means that you're going to be a jack of all trades, and a jack of all trades and pretty darn good at all of them. Or you can be super stylized, like you could be a character modeler and just be amazing character modeler, the best in the world. If you choose to do that, you're competing with an awful lot of people who are already very good at a limited number of jobs. So you have to be really, really good, and you have to be prepared for the fact that you might not be working very often. So if you're a generalist, you have to get a wide variety of skills and a wide variety of styles, and that means a lot of time learning different software and learning how to do different things. But you'll most likely be working more often than if you're specialized. Does that make sense? So what I've done is I've been a generalist since I started. It was only like maybe halfway through my career that I started to really specialize on doing insects. But that's after I had built up a skill set where I could pretty much get hired to do a wide variety of different things, which I still do. I don't always do bugs for a living. I'm working on a whole bunch of different things right now. But the people I work with know my skill set. They know what I'm good at. They know I can handle a whole wide variety of things. So it's nice when somebody calls me up because they're like, Eric's the bug guy, get him to do some bugs, because that's one of my favorite things to work on. But more often than not, I'm working on a bunch of different things, and I've done all different styles from like anime to realistic. I tend to do more realistic stuff than stylistic stuff, but I do stylistic stuff. I do a lot of titles. Title work is fun because it's usually a small team and it's very creative, it's that could be a lot of fun. And I do like scientific visualization, all that kind of stuff. So for the most part, I'm a generalist. So my portfolio has a wide variety of styles and then a whole bunch of bugs in it. So I would say if you're, it's probably, financially speaking, it's better to be a generalist with a wide variety. Put some organic stuff, some hard surface stuff. Try not to put anything in your portfolio that you don't want to do. So I saw this in a lecture someday, a long time ago. Somebody was like, if you don't like doing Batmobiles, then don't put Batmobiles in your portfolio. You're going to get hired. They can be very narrow-minded when they're looking at your portfolio. So hopefully that's kind of useful. But at the same time, if your heart is set on being the world's greatest character artist or the world's greatest creature artist or hard surface modeling, and that's really what you want to do, then do it. Just be prepared for some work droughts. The nice thing about working is that when you're working, you're also practicing. The hard thing about when you're working a lot is that it's hard to focus on building the skills that you really want, because you might have to spend a whole day, doing like a garbage rig or UV mapping or whatever. I mean, maybe that's not the thing that you really want to spend time on, but that's what you got to do for the job. Hobbyists have the advantage that they can do whatever they want. They can get really good at something because they can just, they're hobbyists. They don't have to worry about being fired. And they can also spend 6 or 7 years on a project as opposed to a few days. So, yeah, there's good and bad to everything. Let's see here. I've been rambling for so long, I'm paying attention to what I'm doing. You know, it's like one thing I need to do more of, which I haven't done, is portfolio, having other people look at my portfolio. Even though I've been doing this for over 20 years, you know, I definitely need to have my portfolio looked at and revamped, because it's the stuff that's in my portfolio I'm happy with, but the organization is terrible. It's just I just thrown stuff on ArtStation whenever I make it, and half the time it's not even labeled correctly, so you don't know what I'm working on. So I just need to spend some time going back and fixing my portfolio. But you can have people, you know, at conferences do a portfolio review. It's always good to hear some advice. Or, you know, some people will do like a YouTube channel where you can submit their portfolio and they'll give you their opinion in real time. And that could be useful too. Okay, let's take a look at this guy. It's kind of just done a real quick version of the stuff in the back here. It's not super accurate, but right now it's okay for now. At least it's there. I'm going to move this back a little bit. One bit of advice that's always helpful in every field is be careful who you diss, be careful who you talk smack about, whether it's online or with your friends, because the person that you're making fun of today might be the person who is in charge of hiring at the next studio. And don't need to be making enemies like that. It's not worth it, even though it's tempting sometimes to say somebody's a total idiot or a jerk. It's not always worth it to express your opinion that way if it's not going to really do anything but make you feel good. The other thing about doing, you know, one of the reasons I got into doing bugs, aside from the fact that I'm fascinated with them, is that I knew that not a lot of people were devoting a lot of time to doing insects. And really like putting the time into studying them and understanding how they work and so on. So that was an area where I was like, well, I can exploit the fact that, you know, here's something I enjoy doing, but not a lot of people are doing it. And that could be useful philosophy. So it's like, you know, if you start putting in sports cars in your studio, in your portfolio, well, there's a lot of sports car models out there already, and a lot of really good sports cars. You know, or there's a lot of cliches that you can avoid, like the electric guitar. It might be fun to model, good student piece, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of electric guitar models out there, and there's stuff you can get on Turbo Squid. The same thing with fan art. Fan art is interesting because, on the one hand, it can be very cliche. There's an awful lot of Hulk models out there. And so sometimes I can turn off people who are looking at portfolio. It's like yet another Venom model, yet another Hulk model, or Iron Man, or whatever. But at the same time, it's not always a bad idea to do fan art. Like I heard somebody at this conference talking about how, you know, if you take, you know, a character from, they're using like Arcane as an example. You know, Arcane, whether it's a video game or, you know, the video game League of Legends or whatever, or the TV show, and then make a character that's in the style that would fit in there and give them a backstory, or take a character and modify them in such a way and really build out, you know, the way they put it is, and I'm totally stealing this person's lecture, sorry about that, but it's good advice. A lot of times people looking at your portfolio are looking to see whether or not you can solve problems. Because that's what all of these projects are. A movie is just a series of problems that need to be solved, and they got to find the right people who can do that. So if you can show your in your portfolio somehow that you've come up with a solution to a problem, whether it's how to fit a character into this scene or whatever, how to make a gun, weapon work, fit into the story or whatever, that's really valuable. And that's just something that can help you get hired. So you can do fan art if you really want to do a Star Wars thing or a Marvel thing, but be strategic about how you do it. Don't just do yet another pose of the Hulk or whatever. Do something that's interesting. What that is, I don't know, but a great example is look at the Into the Spider-Verse and that series. I mean, it's Spider-Man, but it's a completely different take on Spider-Man. So they had to come up with a whole different ways to show Spider-Man all these different universes, and personalities, and backstories, and that kind of stuff. So this is a good example of thinking like alternate universe Iron Man or something like that. Does that make sense? I don't know. Well, yeah, AI is definitely a problem. None of us really know what to do with AI yet. It's daunting, but it's also not going to go away anytime soon. You have to figure out a way to use it. And so I'm not saying that I know the answer at all, but I will pose this as a question to anybody who's listening to me ramble while I torture this bug model. The AI tools are going to be used, so who's going to use them? Well, people who make money are going to be the first ones that want to use them, and they'll probably use them in a very stupid way. Hollywood is an industry. It's not an artist co-op. It's not there for making people's dreams come true. It's there for making money. So the people who dream of money, their dreams are coming true. I always say that decisions in the industry are made by MBAs, not MFAs. So they're going to be using AI as a way to bring down costs and increase efficiency. So that's their technique for using AI. So what's our response to that as artists? We had to find a way to use AI to our advantage. In other words, because the way the tools are going to be developed is the way that the developers are going to make the most money off it as well. So if we as artists reject AI completely and say we're not going to touch it, then we're not going to be part of the conversation. And if we don't become part of the conversation, if we don't determine how the tools are going to be used, then the tools are going to be used against us. So as much as I know it's extremely unpopular to use AI because of the ethical issues around how AI is trained, at the same time you ignore AI at your own peril. All of us do. If we just decide to do a complete and utter boycott on it, like I say, you're not going to be part of the conversation. The developers of AI, hopefully, are going to listen to the people who are using it. I hope that makes some kind of sense. Me personally, it's like I love what I'm doing right now, which is pushing geometry around and forming things and creating stuff. I did not get into this industry so that I can type in a prompt and look at some crappy piece of art as a result. That's sort of what I'm thinking right now, but my opinion is evolving just like everybody else. There's some things where AI is probably going to be super helpful, like speeding up rigging and UV mapping and all that kind of stuff. It's not great for the riggers, obviously. If you know people who are hardcore into rigging, it's an art form unto itself, and they really love it. But also, there's some things that have been rigged 1,000 times, like typical humanoids. So there's not much more we can do to develop on that. So AI could be used to maybe speed up that process, so that we're not sitting around repeating the same thing over and over again. You know. How are we doing on time here? So I got about 10 minutes left on this session. I think what I'll do next week is I'll get into poly painting and detailing, doing the fine detail and the poly painting. But I think maybe the last thing I need to do today is tackle the eyes here. Sorry about the sniffing. Let's take a look at our eyes. These guys have, you know, insect eyes have basically resolution. Think of it as a monitor. Each one of these little dots right here is a hexagon. It's called an ommatidia. It's a lens. It's an individual lens, and it sits on top of a long column. Light travels through each individual lens and down that long column to a nerve, and together it forms a picture of the environment. And much like your pixels on your screen form a picture, individual dots. Think of it that way. So the more dots you have, or the more lenses you have, the higher the resolution. So with katydids, there you can see it's pretty dense. This is a great one right here. These are very small lenses, and there's a lot of them, and they're evenly distributed. If you take a look at dragonfly eyes, they're even more dense. And some insect eyes will even have an area that, like the bottom part on dragonflies, will have higher density than the upper part, because as they're flying, they're looking down and they're looking for prey. So you'll have this sort of zone, this acute zone on the eye, which is kind of cool. So for these guys, yeah, I mean, it's almost smooth, but trust me when I say that ommatidia are definitely there. All insect eyes have them. There are some very low resolution eyes, like some ants will only have like a single ommatidia, or just insects that are underground might only have a few. So how do we create this kind of texture on our insect eyes? Well, I think one thing I'll do is maybe separate the eyes from the rest of the head here. So I've done kind of a quick Z-remesh here, which is fine. Let me see. Let's go down to the lowest subdivision level. And okay, so now these is poly. Okay, so these are separate geometries. So what I'll do is I'm just going to go and do subtool, split hidden. And this is convenient because it keeps the subdivision levels, so I still have my higher subdivision levels on this guy. And if I go back to the head, still have higher subdivision levels on this one. So nothing's been disturbed by separating those into separate subtools. So now if we take a look at this, go down to the lowest subdivision level, and like what I was trying to do before, yeah, you can speculate what area, where AI is going, but at this moment it's not very different from TurboSquid or Adobe Stock. I totally agree with that statement. I think that's a good way to look at it. I'm more surprised that we haven't all been replaced by all the talented artists from other countries who are working for cheaper. Well, that I think is happening, because the industry is in a massive slump, and Los Angeles has been terrible. A lot of artists are applying for jobs. Artists with lead artists are applying for jobs at entry-level positions, because the competition, because of globalization, is so strong. And I know that it's definitely been for me. 2024 was probably one of my worst years, financially speaking, in terms of also doing work. And that is definitely because of globalization is a big part of that. So what do we do about that? Beats me. When I worked at Bad Robot, I was working on Star Trek Beyond. It was a lot of fun. But basically what we would do is we would work on our stuff, my models, hero models or whatever, and then it would be shipped overnight to Korea, where the models would be finished and all that kind of stuff. So that reduced the amount of work that I actually had on that job. So it's definitely something that happens because, again, they have the pressure to keep costs low is so strong that, and this is digital art, so there's no reason to not to send it overnight to another country. And, a lot of artists in those countries have gotten very, very good, so a lot of competition. But, at the same time, methods of entertainment and art consumption is always changing and always evolving, so there are other opportunities. If you decide you're going to do the same thing and work in the same pipeline for the rest of your career, that's not going to happen. It's going to change. So you might find that the way we consume entertainment also changes the way that we create it. We do polygroups. Like I mentioned, I was talking about books earlier. A long time, early in my career, I wrote a lot of books. I wrote books on Maya. I wrote books on ZBrush. They were long, involved projects. They took a lot of time to do, and they were hard. I had to work with editors and all that kind of good stuff. So it was very involved. Sorry, what I'm doing is I'm creating polygroups on here. And there's polygroup. Well, now if you go, back those days, you go into a bookstore and you'd find the graphics books department would be multiple shelves. Remember the big, thick books on like Adobe Photoshop? I wrote big, thick. I think my Maya books were over 1,000 pages. Nowadays, if you can find a bookstore and you go into one, CG art is maybe half a shelf, 2 shelves, because publishers realize that there's not as much money in writing books on software because everyone's posting videos to YouTube. So YouTube has completely changed the way that we deal with instruction, videos in general. And it makes sense because if you're going to learn something like ZBrush or Blender, sitting there with a book, reading the tutorials and then doing it and then going back to the book is kind of exhausting. It's much easier to watch somebody on one screen and repeat what they're doing on your screen. So, and then it's also, it can take months and months to write a book, and then when you write it and you release it, the next version of the software comes out the next week and makes half your book out of date. So that's just an example of how we consume things changes the method we create it. So I do live streams and YouTube videos and Gnomon videos and that kind of stuff rather than writing books. What I want to do here is I want to go into Z plugin, UV unwrap, symmetry, polygroups, unwrap. Okay, so now if we take a look, I'll go down to the map, morph UV, so this is what the UVs look like. That's fine. So what I'm going to do now is subdivide, and I'm going to get this up pretty high. 7 million polygons. And now what I'll do is I'll go into surface, noise plug, and let's do hexagon, hex tile. I'm going to get the order thickness down, tile radius down. Let's try this. And let's set this to UV. So you can see I got a hexagon in there, although it's pretty big. Set mix basic noise down to 0. And then let's go into plug and scale and bring this down. And then I'm going to bring the strength way down. It might be, this might not work because these guys are so dense that it's really just going to end up looking like a lot of dots. That's okay. This will at least get me part of the way there. Set the plug-in scale to 0.03. It's 0.025. That. I don't know if that's going to do anything. The Rat Killer Maya book, yeah. Yeah, my book, I think I dropped it on my foot once, and it was painful. So here's what I mean, this is pretty good. What I'll do is mask by noise, and then go into masking, and let's boost that mask a little bit. What we can also do is maybe grow mask. Yeah, that's pretty good. Like I say, since these guys are so dense, it's going to just look like a lot of dots. In this area right here, it's not perfect, but we can go in and fix it up a little bit. I'm going to hide the mask and then go in here and say deformation, inflate, and then just maybe smooth this out a little bit. You know, since this is a cartoony Katie dude, I could choose to not be so, try to be so accurate with the density here, maybe make it lower density. I might do that. Let's go back a little bit. Because the more dense you make it, the more arrows you get in the mask. In these areas right here. Mask, back into surface, noise, edit, and make the scale a little bit bigger. Not that big. Do something like that, because he's a cartoon. And I'll do mask by noise. The other thing I can do is one more time, edit, go into noise plug. Oops. And the hex tile, let's see if this will update. Change the mortar thickness. Yeah, it's going to update. So I'll make the mortar thickness a little bit bigger. That's as big as it goes. This is another way to kind of adjust the scale. That might work a little bit better. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now we'll do mask by noise. Yeah, that's better. And we'll go in here and say masking, boost mask, boost it, boost it, boost it, boost it, boost it, boost it, boost, boost. Okay. And then I like to hide the mask just so I can see how the deformation looks. Do some inflate, that's too much. There we go. So, keeping with kind of the cartoony stylized version of this bug, I always like to make sure that I have this kind of pattern on the eyes, because it's one of the things that I think that makes insects very insect. You know what I mean? Spiders don't have eyes like this. Spiders' eyes are more like a single lens. So this is something that you basically see on insects, and then obviously some other related arthropods. There's some decapods and crustaceans that have really crazy eyes, like mantis shrimp and that kind of thing. But insect eyes generally, except for the ocelli, which is another story altogether, their primary eyes are compound eyes, and so they have this look. So I always like to try and put that on when I can. So there's my little katydid for tonight. So I'm going to kind of end it here. Thanks for watching my stream. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it was a lot of talking and not enough sculpting. But I think the model's in good shape, and I think next week I'll get into some fine detailing and some poly painting because he's looking pretty good. So I hope you enjoyed the live stream, and I'll see you next week.